Airbus A310 and how to start the aircraft from scratch. The Airbus is part of the 40th anniversary update of Flight Simulator 2020, so that's good, and I hope you liked it because it's free for all of you. So let's go inside the aircraft and let's start the process, right? So first of all, where can you find the checklist? Well, there are two options to find the checklist. One of them is in the electronic flight bag or the flight pad or whatever you want to call it, and that's where you can see the normal checklist. And the normal checklist is, I would say, as you can see, really short. There are some details, but I would say sometimes it's hard to figure out, hey, where are those buttons, right? And that's where we've got the extended checklist for. The extended checklist can be found on the top in the bar, and here you can see the checklist divided up into the individual sections, like the preliminary contact or cockpit preparation, the flight deck preparation, etc. Right, until let's say even I would say above 10,000 feet, top of climb, decent preparation, decent procedure, everything is there. So really cool. Within these sections, there are multiple options which you can validate, right? So that's also very nice. But there are some more good news because Builds, which is responsible for this Airbus A310, also published a PDF document, which you can find a link to in the description of this video, which contains some more detail, because in some scenarios there's, I would say, a small number of information or a small part of information which might not be, I would say, entirely clear. So let me also take away those, I would say, things which are not clear, so keep an eye on that. So we're going to start with the preliminary cockpit preparation, and we're going to start with the cockpit, right? So what you can do is you can push this I and it will move you to, in this case, the battery section. So this is the electric power. So everything which has to do with power can be found in this section. This is the battery. And then if we move down, we can also see the external power, the APU generator, and generator 1 and generator 2 for the AC bus, right? So this is the DC normal bus, as they call it, and this is the AC, ESS, and emergency bus. And we will come to that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So the nice thing is that there's always a ticked item here, which makes sure that you can, let's say, check it off the list and then continue, right? Because the next section is the hydraulic panel. You see the blue bar, the green bar, and the yellow bar, or the yellow gouge. And what it states in the documentation is that if the electric pumps are switched off, which is the case, because else you would see some more information over here, you can, I would say, should see the green one in the green part, the blue one in the green part, and the yellow one in the green part. There's one really important thing which you need to keep in mind is that pressurizing this one, the green gouge, is not allowed without any clearance. So you first need to get clearance before you can do that, right? Pretty clear. So we're going to check it off. Next up is the wiper switches, right? The captain one, so we can switch on the wipers if it rains, to off in this case, but also to slow and fast. And the same thing is for the FO, which stands for first officer. So you can easily turn it and then it will work if the aircraft is powered, of course. I'm going to check it. Next one is the gears, which is over here, and the gears are also down because else we would obviously be on the ground. That would be weird. And the flaps and sledge handle is set to in agreement, which is set to 0. Now you might ask yourself, hey, flaps, I'm aware of that one, but what are the sleds? Well, for that one we need to go outside again and then have a look at the aircraft itself. So here you see the wing of the aircraft, right? So normally I would say you are pushing out the flaps, I would say during takeoff and during landing, right? To extend, I would say, the wings, right? You will make the wings bigger with that. And for the flaps, you can find them here. And if you would extend the flaps, you will see that this part will go down. Now, if you move to the front of the aircraft or of the wing, we can also see that in this case, this part also has, or is separated from the, I would say, main part of the wing. And these are called the slats. So slats on the front, flaps on the back. If we are extending the flaps, it will also extend the slats in this case. So if we go back in the cockpit, you can see it over here, right? 0, 0. But if we push it down one position, then the slats are set to 15, while the flaps are still set to 0. If we push the one down one other position, then both the slats and flaps are set to 15. And I will show you that in a few minutes. So we're going to check it off because everything was okay. Then we've got the reverse leveler, which is set to down, right? Which is the these positions, right? We need to check the throttle, which is okay. And then we're going to make sure that the fuel levelers are set to off. So we're going to highlight them. And here you can see that both of them for engine 1 and 2 is set to off, which is good. So again, check the box and continue with the weather radar. The weather radar can be found here, right? So if you would zoom out a bit, or then you can see that if you follow the engine, then you will see all the buttons to control the ECAM page, and there you will find the weather page, or the weather radar, sorry. And the weather radar has several options, right? It has the weather tilt, but also the weather mode, the weather gain, and also which system it should use. And by default it's set to off, which is according to the standards of this, I would say, nice system or nice checklist. Then the next one, also important, external power. It says if available. So you already saw that in the power section there was this nice button which says AVAIL, right? Which means for available. If we would press this button, then we're, I would say, connected to the ground power unit, also known as the GPU. The other thing which you can do is connect it to another part or another data source or power source, but that will be discussed in a few minutes. So we're gonna switch this one on, and as you can see, now several lights will start to burn, and you also hear some systems, I would say, starting up as part of the start process. The next part is the APU fire system, right? The APU fire system is located here next to the, I would say, or right above the electric power, and there are two options, right? So there's the small one, which is the squib option as they call it, and that will only illuminate this squib option, as you can see, right, this button. The next one is a special one, that's the APU loop test, and what you need to do is you need to press it and keep it pressed. Then it will go to a loop, and if you're lucky it will start beeping, etc. And once you've done that, you can release it, and then all the let's say LEDs should go out. Normally, if you would perform this test, if the aircraft has been, I would say, fully started, which is not the case, you will also hear a lot of beeping around, and that will be, say, something which we will figure out in a few minutes when, for example, testing the engine fire, right? Because currently you don't see much happening. You only see loop A, loop B, and then the APU being, let's say, illuminated. As we already mentioned, right, we're on external power, so that's good. So it says here, okay, if there's external power available, you can do it, but if it's not available, then you don't need to do it. And that's weird because in the IndyBuilds manual, that step is below the APU one. In this case, it's, I would say, above it. And then you've got the APU master system, right? So the APU master system stands for auxiliary power unit, and this will allow you to boot the aircraft without being connected to an external power source. In this case, we're connected to an external power source, so we're not going to start the APU. Well, we will start it, but not at this moment. Then we've got the navigation system, and I need to move this one, I'd say, a little bit here, because there are three of them. One's located here, which is IRS number 1, and we need to set it to nav mode. The second one is on the right, also set it to nav mode, and the third one is in the middle. So be aware of that, because if you won't switch it on, it will result in some error messages displayed on this nice display. So that display will simply tell you, hey, what's wrong and what do you need to do. So once we've done that, we can go to the ISDU. And the ISDU, well, to be honest, I didn't, I would say, find it yet in this aircraft. And I was also wondering, hey, what is ISDU standing for? And ISDU, if we look at the abbreviations, it stands for Interior Sensor Display Unit. And I would say if we look at this aircraft, I really don't have any idea where we can find it. Probably it's somewhere in, I would say, in one of these sections. But if you know where to find it, let me know, because I'm really interested in that. So for now we say, okay, hey, let's accept it. So we're gonna, I would say, set the check mark. And before we do that, we also need to make sure that we set the other check marks over here. The next step is the oxygen, right? This is for the crew, as stated here already. So we need to switch to on, and as soon as it switches to on, you can see that it moves to the green area, which is the good position. So we're gonna mark it, and then we're gonna switch to the initiation light switch. And this light switch is kind of cool because it shows you every light will be illuminated, so you can validate if the lights are working as expected. Well, in this case, everything is working as expected, so we can switch them off again, right? So switching them on illuminates everything, including the lights over here, and if switching it off, we'll switch them off again. The VHF radios, also known as nav1 and nav2, you can configure them using the kilohertz and megahertz button. Kilohertz the small one, megahertz the large one. And if you want, you can use this small button over here to make the active radio, let's say, switching over. And I will show it on the right side because there we don't have the parking brake. So simply see, okay, if you switch to the secondary navigations or secondary nav, you will see that the light will change to the other one. Sorry, these are the COM radio. This is the COM radio. I'm mistaken because navigation radio is a different position. So be aware of that. You can easily switch between two communication radios. So with that, we completed the preliminary cockpit preparation. So those were, I would say, 17 tasks, right? We did skip this one because there's no need to switch on the APU because we're running an external power. So time to move on to the next step. And the next step is the flight deck preparation. As you can already imagine, so once we, I would say, made sure that everything is okay, we need to make sure that we, I'd say, make the deck ready so we can take off. One of the things you will see is that it will show a message here on the bottom, right? And this is the MCDU, right? So what we're going to do is initialize it. So we're going to press clear. It will clear the values. It will show you, in this case, the aircraft type, the engine type, and also the primary and secondary database, and the OP program, which is OS 10607. What we need to do is we need to press the init button, right? So we're going to press init, and then we're going to tick the item, and then we're going to define the from and the to. And the from and to simply the airport which you're departing from and the airport which you are planning to go to, based on the ICAO codes, right, of that aircraft or of that airport, sorry. So what you can say in this case, let's open the VFR map. We're gonna say, okay, hey, let's zoom in which airport are we located. Hopefully it doesn't show it in a few seconds. So Kilo Mike Delta Whiskey, and then use the / and we're gonna go to Kilo Juliet Foxtrot Kilo, which is Kennedy Airport. Press the button here, then press return. Kind of weird, but that's how you need to do it. And then you can see that it has provisioned the from and to. It has provisioned the long and the latitude, and that's something which you need to validate. And some other options. Most other options, as you can see here, I would say are not required yet to configure. That will be done in a later stage. But one of the things which you need to do is align the IRS. So that's done. So we now confirmed our position. So we're gonna make this one smaller and then go to the top of the aircraft again, because we need to switch on the smoking and also make sure that the seat belts are switched to on. and then we're gonna perform the hydraulic check, right? So the hydraulic check, what are we gonna do? We're gonna validate that everything is still in the green, that there's no weird messages here. You can see that these are standing with low PR, which stands for low pressure, but that's currently not an issue. We can leave it as is. What they say is that you, I would say in the other manual which I have, is that you need to make sure that the engine pumps are set to auto, and in that case the hydraulic pumps low PR lights illuminated amber. Well, that's already the case, so there's no need to, I would say, use the other buttons anymore. So good shape. We're gonna tick the item and continue with the servo controller, and that one is located over here, right? So this is the servo controller, and it should say low PR lights illuminated. Well, I'm not sure why it's not burning, because I tried, I would say, playing around with these buttons, of course, but whatever you do, they will not illuminate with the low PR, except if you switch off the option, then it will show off, but that shouldn't be the case according to the manual. Next one is the flight recorded ground control, and that option can be found here. So you can simply switch it on, which will illuminate the button, although you can barely see it, it will do it. And then we continue with the lights, and the light section can be found over here, right? So if we zoom out, you would see the cockpit, then move to the top, and that's where you find the lights. The good thing is that it's really easy, because everything needs to be off or needs to be retracted, right? The strobes, the beacon, the runway turn off, and the nav and logos. But for the nav and logos, that's, I would say, one of the exceptions, because this one needs to be set to 1, right? The rest either retracted or off. So we're gonna place those check marks, and then we're gonna continue with the ATS. So the ATS can be switched on like this, right? Engine trimming also here. So ATS has been enabled, so that's good. And then we go to a special section, which is a pitch and trim. And this one is that special that you really need to be, I would say, careful. And what I mean with careful is, in some cases when you're too fast, the IRS has not been aligned yet. And if that's the case, you will see that the pitch button will go to off again, like this. So this means that our IRS is not yet aligned, right? And here it also says IRS in align, so it's still busy aligning the IRS. What you can do is either wait, or you can, I would say, do it later on. But if you don't do it, you will see all kind of warnings, which I will show you in a few minutes, unless they will stay on for now. It looks like they don't, so I will skip this step for now. Normally I would say, okay, hey, wait, but since that will result in, I would say, a very long recording, because the IRS alignment has been set to real time, I'm not gonna spend more time on that. Then we've got the electronic power panel, and that's this one. It's at shed, which is the correct position. So leave it like that, and then tick the box, and then continue with the fire drill. And as you can see, this part is exactly the same as for the APU, right? You've got the small button, which is the squid or the squib, but in this case it both illuminates agent 1 and agent 2, which is correct. And then we've got this button, which is the loop test, and this loop test will perform the same test as we already did, right? So loop 1, loop 2, and if you press it again, it will do it again. So that's correct, right? There's, I would say, I think the right engine generates some warning messages about it, but let's look at that in a few minutes, because we still need to go to the other panels, right? So the electrical IND panel needs to be set to EMER and ESS, which is the case. This is the AC bus selector, which is for the generators and the external power, while this one, the DC bus, is for the battery, as you can see, but leave it as is, as recommended by the manual. And then we're gonna go to the engine, right? So the engine selector mode, which is above the APU, needs to be switched to off in this case, because we're gonna switch it to A or B and then start the engines individually in a few minutes. The view panel, also really important, right? The view panel, without view, where would we be in this case? Do you need to change something here? Well, yes, you need to change something here, because else nothing will happen, right? There's only one disclaimer. If you for some reason are refueling and the refueling has not been finished, you should leave them off. In this case, refueling has already been done, so we're gonna make sure that they are all switched to on. So these ones are on, that's good. This one, you don't need to touch it. It's a trim tank feed mode and it's either forward or off. But according to the manual, you should leave it to off. What you, however, need to do is make sure that you set the X feed flow bar vertical. And the X feed flow bar can be found here. So it's already in the correct position, right? It's in the vertical position. So there's no need for now to change it. So keep that in mind. So all good. Do we need to change anything here? No. According to the manual, it should say low LP valve flow bar should be illuminated. But in this case, well, I tried to figure out where it is, but I really can't find it because I would have expected that these ones, because these are the LP valves, would, I would say, show something, right? You can see that there are guards over this one, and that's good. So we can leave it for now. The only thing we need to do is check the item. Then the APU fire again, right? Script test and the loop test is good. And then we're gonna come to the cabin pressure, because the pressure is important, right? So what do you need to do? So what you would expect is that the manual press amber arrow, which is this one, should be set and should be extinguished, but in this case it was not on, so we switch it to on, right? Manual pressurize. System 1 and system 2 select switches illuminated green. System 1 and system 2, I really don't have any idea where they are, but I do expect that it would be somewhere here, but I don't see anything here. Oh, here they are, sorry, overlooked them. So system 1, system 2, illuminated green. Well, in this case they're not illuminated green, so probably something is wrong, which we'll figure out in a few minutes. Or do they mean these two, right? Because these are illuminated green, so that works. Yeah, because this is a regulator 1 and 2, and this is system 1 and 2, so they're in the correct position. Then check the cap alt, which is this one, right? To make sure that it's not in the red or yellow zone. And we need to make sure that we're checking the diff press and cabin VS for appropriate indications. So that means simply check all these indicators to see if they're in the green area or are not in the yellow or red areas. So that's good. So there's no need for us to make any changes as we speak. Then we're gonna check it off and we're gonna go to the window heater switches. They're all switched to off, so we can switch them to on, which is the case. And next thing is the probe heaters, which are here. And this is for standby, right? So we can leave it switched off or on. And this is for the first officer, and this is for the captain. Then we're going to go to engine number 2. So again, test script is showing correctly. Let's then do the next test, which is this one, is the loop test. And that also works as expected, right? The lights are illuminating, this one is illuminating. Good to go. Then the ventilation one. So the ventilation one, is it a little bit of a special one? Well, not really, but it should be illuminated. In this case, if we illuminate it, it will be off. So we're gonna leave it like that. So that's the correct position. In some cases, the lights are not illuminating, so be aware of that. Don't focus too long on that. The overboard valve is now in the correct position. Mark this as fixed, and then go to the emergency exit lights, and then you need to set it to arm, so not to on, which is this position, but set it to arm, which is good. Next one is the if APU bleed switch is off, check X feed flow controller bar, right? The X feed controller bar, that was this one, it's set correctly, so that's good. And if the APU is running, APU bleed switch is on. Well, the APU bleed is not running, so we can leave it off. And then we're coming to the conditions, so let's such as the temperature. For some reason it doesn't, I would say, show you where it is, but the temperature sensors or the temperature piece can be found here, right? So here we see the pack temperature and also the compartment temperature, and here you can make small modifications, right? For example, to say, okay, hey, I want to increase the heat or whatever you want, or want to set it to colder. Then you can do that using these buttons. So we're gonna mark it before we go to the pack one, and as mentioned already, the pack is over here. We don't need to do anything here, right? You can change the pack switch to auto or to hot or to cold. Well, in this case we will leave it in the position where it's currently in. Before we go to the oxygen panel, which is over here. We already knew this one, right? We check it, still green, so good to go. Tick the item. Before we're gonna continue with the PFD brightness and the ND brightness. So the PFD and ND brightness. So what does this button do? Well, let's have a look at it, right? I must be honest, in the dark you would see it better. You can see it here, right? It becomes darker or it increases, and same one or same thing is applicable to this one, although it's a little bit harder to see. Which will, I would say, make it also darker or more bright. You could see it a bit. So we're gonna check these items and then continue with the flight director. The flight director can be found over here, also known as the FPV. If you switch it on, then you will see a small marker in the top right of this display, right, of the PFD. You will see FD1, right? Let me show it again. Switch to off, switch to on, you will see FD here, so that's good. So we're gonna tick the item, and the command bars in view, right? The command bars are here. At least I do think that that's being referred to, or sorry, this one. This is the command bar, and that's also in view. Although the I would say the yoke is a little bit before it, but here are the buttons where we can switch easily between the different options. So that's good. We're gonna mark it as okay, and then we're gonna make sure that the navigation mode is set to nav, which is the case, and then set the DH. The DH can be found here, so you can switch it on, and then using this one you can change the DH to -5. And to make sure that it's set to -5, you would expect it would be somewhere here, but if you don't see it, you can still check the position, because if you would move the knob left or right, you will see that in the right corner of this one, where we also the FD, it says -5, which is good. And then we're going to go to the FCP. No idea what they mean with it. It's somewhere in here, but for some reason it's not illuminated. So we're going to place a check mark here, and then we can say, hey, Captain Switch Panel. Also no ID, it could be this one, so we're gonna mark it for now. Next one is the speed. We need to make sure that it's set to 0. Well, that's the case, so check it off. And if we go to the RMI, we should make sure that there are no flags and compass, and the compass agrees, right? So you need to make sure that you're flying in the correct direction, so make sure that that's the case, and that's in this case is the case, so we're gonna flag it off, as well as any warnings in the PFD, which is over here. No warnings, and the ND select display normal. I would say I would try to figure out what it is, right? But it's, let's say, kind of hard to figure out where the normal position is. It looks like that it's this one on the bottom, right? So if you go here, you can switch to GPS flap switch to off flap OVRD, override, and normal, and looks like that's the switch which they're referring to. So we're gonna mark it. Then the next one is the altimeter, right? The altimeter can be shown here, and here. You can change it using the altimeter block, which is on the left side on both systems. This one is the primary, this one is the standby, but if you press the letter B from Bravo, it will set it on both systems at the same time. Makes it easier. And there's also no flag, which is good. Then the IVSI, we need to make sure that the TACAS is set to off. So where do you find it? Oh, incorrect button. Well, you find it over here, right? So if we move to this position and then we'll have a look at the TACA system, which is over here. This is the transponder code, and this is the let's say different modes which it can be in, and currently it's set in the correct way. You can see that it's very hard to see, right? Below this, I would say, engine button, that's the off button, that's the transponder alt system. And that needs to be switched to off, as well as this one are in the correct position. So I'm gonna mark it, and then we're gonna go back to the ADF RMI, which I think we already checked. So I'm gonna make sure that it's being checked, and then we're gonna continue with this one. It's a GPWS. Test and cancel. Nothing really happens, so I think that is expected. Again, I'm not 100% sure about this one. Then the clock, which is set correctly, so we don't need to do anything about that. The standby horizon, which is referred to by this one, that works as expected, as well as the standby altimeter, right, which we just set by the B from Bravo. Then, before we're continuing with I would say the rest of the items, we need to make sure that the slat flap position indicator is correct. So this is the slat flap indicator, right? So on the left side is the slats, meaning the systems on the front of the wing, and the flaps are on the back. And in relation to that, there's also the VFE, which stands for the I would say the vertical speed for the flap extension, right? So the maximum speed which you can fly, because else you will break these slats and flaps, right? So with 40 maximum extended, you can not, I would say, go faster than 180 knots. So be aware of that. Brake pressure, which is this one, it's, I would say, well, it's closely to the green, but that's, I would say, is normal. So we can check it off and make sure that we have working brakes. And then we've got the alternate braking system, which is over here, and this is the alternate braking system, and that should be switched in this case to on. So what you can do is really what we can do to test it, also release the parking brake, right? Then you see the pressure dropping, and then you can test this system according to the manual, right? So that's good. I've put the brakes again back to the normal position, so be aware of that. So this one needs to be set to alt on, remove the parking brakes, and then I'd say push the brakes, and then you will see that they will increase, which means that the pressure is working, right? So releasing them again, which will bring the pressure back to normal. If that's the case, then it's fine, and then switch it back to normal mode, and then apply the parking brakes. Don't forget to set the parking brakes, because that's also the next step. Auto brake switches, they should be illuminated. Well, in this case they're not illuminated, although there are, but it's hard to see, right? You're using them for, I would say, doing takeoff and doing landing, max for takeoff, and either of the three ones on landing, depending on how long the runway is. Then we're coming to the ref and ref unlink lights. If we press the buttons here, well, I tried figuring out where they are. Well, they're here at the top, but it's kind of, I would say, hard to see. They should be extinguished, which I was thinking something different to be shown, but it looks okay. Then we go to the engine instruments and lights, and that's all the part which you see here, right? So the N1, the N2, the EGT, which shows the temperature, and the FF, right? So if we zoom in a bit, we can also see that here's the oil pressure and quantity for both engines, and here we can see the actual values, right? The RPMs for the N1 and the RPMs for N2. So something which we need to keep in mind when starting the engines. landing elevation, that can be set using this button, right? So you can increase the landing elevation if you want to set it. So set, and then continue with the landing gear warning test, which also doesn't work. It looks like that the aircraft is not fully powered because some of the systems should really make a lot of noise. Then brake fan, which is used to cool down the brakes. Well, the brakes are cooled down already, but if you're using the brakes a lot, then you can use them to cool down the brakes. There's an additional fan for that. And we need to make sure that the speed brake is retracted, disarmed, which is the case. So I'm going to check the item. Takeoff warning lights. Or takeoff warning. This one will validate if the aircraft is in the correct position to take off, and you can see that when I'm pressing it, you see a lot of warnings. You see that the sleds are not in the takeoff position, as well as that the engine oil temperature is low and the batteries are off, right? So we're going to release it right now, but there's really something which we need to fix before we can let's say take off. Fuel levelers, those are here, right? We checked them already, but we need to check them again. They're set to off. And then the warning systems, which are here. What do we need to do for that one? I think that we don't need to take too much action. Safeified, which is, I would say, means that there's a lock here, which prevents you from pressing it. Then the squawk code. The squawk code can be found below the engine mixture or the engine fuel. Normally you would set the transponder code, right, using this small knob and the large knobs, and then make sure that you press the ident button to identify yourself, and as well as use the test button. And then you can use the transponder mode to change the transponder mode where you are in. And then here you've got the transponder alternate system mode. Since we don't have a squawk code right now, we're not going to set it. The same thing is for the ADFs. The ADFs can be switched to tone and on, and then you can configure the kilohertz and the megahertz, or well, the frequency, let's keep it that way, using these nice buttons. Tick the item, and then we're going to make sure that the rudder is reset to 0. So that's done. I'm going to tick the item again, and then we're gonna test the weather radar, which we can find here. So we're gonna switch it to test, and by using that mode we can test the weather. Then officially the next step would be programming the flight, but since that will be a complete separate video, I'm not going to show it in this one, so we'll skip it for now. So keep an eye on my channel for new videos which I will post regularly. Now the new update is out. There are more topics to discuss, so I will leave this one for now, and I will continue with the TRP, which can be found over here. And these are the multiple options which we have, right? The flex temperature, which is can be configured using this one, and then set to this button to auto. And the other one, the toga, also needs to be set for a tow with manual thrust, which is also the correct position. So nothing to be afraid of, right? So you can switch the buttons over here. So it looks like it's either one of them, to be honest, because this says, okay, select auto for TO with profile, and this is for manual thrust, right? So if you apply manual thrust using the manual method. Then the cockpit door is closed. Well, you can check it, but it's, let's say, referring to the incorrect position because the cockpit door is behind us. Let's do it like this, easier. And then you can see it's closed, so that's good. And there's also, let's say, a button here, right? So if we would reset the view and move to that position, you can also see that they are, you can lock it or you can unlock it. The other arrow is referring to the door itself, so good enough. The next step is we need to start the APU, right? Because at one point we will disconnect the external power. So if we would not do this first, then the complete aircraft will shut down. because it simply doesn't have the power, right? So we're gonna make sure that we switch this one on, and this one should be set to on, which is illuminated here. Then if you would look at this nice panel, you can switch to the different modes, right? You can switch to the doors, but you can also switch to the APU mode. And if you would pay close attention to this right screen, you will see that the APU will start, let's say, will start progressing. It might take some time before it's progressing, but eventually it should show that it's being started, and then should show the value of 100 here, right? So then we'll be ready to, let's say, power the aircraft. So let's first have a look at the panels here, right? It's set to on, which is good. And it takes some time, right? So don't worry, because you can already see it is, I would say, increasing. So don't give up too soon. You will see that the N increases and also the EGT starts to increase. And then you simply need to wait till it's at 100%. And that might take a few minutes before that's the case. And the landing elevation, while we're discussing, should be set to the target airport, right, the destination airport. So in this case we set it to the same airport as we currently are, but normally you would set it to the destination airport. Once we've done that, we already did a lot, right? So stay with me, because we're almost there. This one has been switched on, right? It's at 100%. So then we can make sure that we set the APU bleed switch. And the APU bleed switch can be found here, right, in this position. So we need to switch it to on. So that's good. And once that has been done, and we're 100% sure, we can switch off the power without, I would say, starting from scratch, right? Because you can see that the aircraft is still, let's say, in normal mode. Nothing has gone off, so everything is good to go. Gonna tick the item. And then we're gonna continue with the next option. However, what we still see is that the batteries are switched to off. So what I'm gonna do in this case, I'm gonna switch them to on, because based on, I would say, reading the checklist, I couldn't find, I would say, an option to switch on the batteries, and I can imagine that I missed it somewhere. The only position where I found it, to be honest, was in the first stage, which was set here to switch them to auto. So let's do that using this one, because then we can quickly go to it. We can switch them to on, right? And now if we would go back to the previous panel, you can see that everything is now fine, right? It still is, say, showing some different numbers here which we need to populate, but that will be done in a future video. But these ones are all in green, so good to go. We completed the flight deck preparation. So next step is we can make sure that we are gonna start the engines. So first of all, make sure that these buttons are on, and as the signs is also switched to on, and this one is switched to auto, which isn't the case, but we can, or it's also set to auto, sorry, that's good. Ticket, quantity of fuel, make sure that you are having the correct amount of fuel based on the flight plan. We're gonna check it for now, and then we're gonna check the navigation. In this case you won't see much here, but the weird thing is that once you started the engines, which we'll do in a few minutes, you will see that they will start illuminating for some reason. Well, let's say for now, as you can see, nothing is illuminated. Also here, that's not the case. Landing level elevation, we already set it, right? To show you again, right? It's over here. We set it to 500, and altimeters have been set correctly. So double checking again. Brake mode, normal, good. windows are closed, right? You can check the windows, and the windows can be checked using this display. However, what you need to do is you need to make a change first, and that's kind of hard to see in this position. So I'm going to reach the view and then use the minimal mode, because the doors and the windows can be easily checked by zooming into this panel and then going to the door, which will show you a different view, and here you can check if everything is closed, right? If everything is green, then there's no need anymore to do. So good to go, and switch it on, and then it's time to switch on the beacon and make sure that the parking brakes are still set to on, which is the case. So again, 10 steps completed. A few more to go, because we're going to start the engine. So the first thing we need to do is request pushback. And the pushback normally would be requested by ATC, but this nice aircraft also has a different option. It's the, I would say, is this one. And here you see a weird thing, right? Because the GPU still is, I would say, shown as green, which I think is that it's still, I would say, connected. So let me check if the lights are burning here. Oh, not yet. So that wasn't it. The pushback truck works a little bit between brackets strange, because you would say, well, you would expect that if you would press this button, it would connect the pushback truck. But if you would check here, you will see nothing has happened, right? So what you need to do is you need to press this button, then moves to active, and if we go outside, you will see now that the pushback truck will connect. You also need to be careful because there are some other aircraft, so it's over there. So. And then once it's connected, it will start pushing us back. So it's a good idea to go inside the aircraft and then move your position a little bit like this, because you can still see what's happening. The thing is that normally doing pushback, you will, let's say, likely get the permission to already start the engines. As you can see, the pushback is really slow. So why do you think it is? Yes, because the parking brake is still set. And there's no, I would say, nothing in here which says, hey, you need to remove the parking brakes, which is, I would say, between brackets, kind of weird. But I've decided to leave it as is, because it's probably the normal process. So what we're gonna do in this situation, we're gonna wait till we're being pushed back completely, and to show you the difference, I will remove the parking brake right now. So this is the speed which you go if you would remove the parking brake. Well, much faster, right? The good thing is that using these buttons over here, you can change the direction of the aircraft, right? So if we want to move to the left side, we can do it easily like this. And if you now would go outside, you will see that the aircraft is being pushed back. And if we're happy, then we can simply press stop, right? So are we already happy? Oh, yes we are. So we're gonna press stop, which will disconnect the pushback truck. As you can see, and the aircraft remains powered, right? That's good. And then we can confirm that the area is clear, right? We checked it already, so here it's clear, and well, that one is the responsibility of the co-pilot. And then we can simply start with the rest of the process. So we're gonna place some check marks over here. So we're gonna go to the top again and switch this one to A or B, which makes these ones to arm. So we can arm this one, which means it's set to open. So that's the thing which we've done, right? Then we're gonna focus on this panel, because this panel, I would say, shows the start process of the engine, right? You would see that this is the N2, which you're referring to in the checklist. It needs to be at 20%, and if you would leave it like this, it will not, I would say, increase any further anymore. So what we need to do is, once that stabilized position, you can switch this one on and then move back to the position, and there you will see that it will start increasing further, and then eventually the engine has started. The nice thing is that you can also switch to the engine mode here, which gives you an indication of where the engine is, so you can check the oil pressure, etc. So while this one is starting, right, we can monitor it. If everything goes okay, then we can check it off. If that's the case, we can continue with the next one, right? It says, hey, make sure that the blue light is set to arm, and that's the case. So let's go to the next one, and then let's monitor it again, right? So it's building up here again, and you can see that it also builds up here slowly, really slow. So let's see how far it is, right? It's almost at 20. Now we're gonna continue by switching on this one.
Midway ground Airbus A310 with India request taxi for takeoff straight out departure.
And then you will hear a lot of systems, and that's also where you can see all the outer panels are illuminated, right? So that's what I meant, right? If this one is started, then say you're in a good shape, and then you can see that I would say both the heading as well as the alt select, the speed, the vertical speed, etc. are all set, which I would say makes sense. Shouldn't forget to set the parking brake, as you saw the aircraft was already starting to drive, and that's of course not what we want. However, there's a warning, and before we continue we need to resolve it. Remember that we discussed the iris alignment, right? The iris alignment, which we needed to do, I would say, somewhere really high here, over here, right? So these ones. So these are still in alignment mode in this case. And if you're in alignment mode, you've got one issue, because then you simply can't switch on the pitch trims. Because if you switch them on, you will see that they will switch off automatically. And that's what we need to wait for, right? So if you're too quick, then I would say you're screwed, because then you need to wait till the iris has been aligned. However, there's a really small trick to do that, and what you can do is you can say, hey, iris alignment is instantly, and that will say speed up the process. So let's see if it works directly, because I didn't try this before. If you can change it on the fly, it looks like you can't, so we really need to wait in that case. So switching it again to realistic, because I like to have it realistic. In that case we're screwed, because then we can't simply continue officially. Well, that's officially, right? So believe me, if the iris has been aligned, which you can see on these small lights, so once they are in the normal position, we can, I would say, flip these switches over here, the pitch trim 1 and 2, and then this message will disappear. And you really need to have this message resolved before you really can take off. So since we're waiting, right, we can continue with the rest of the checklist. So we're going to switch off the ignition to off to for normal operations, right? Heavy precipitation or constant something, I can't read what it says here. Then you need to switch it to on, but that's not the case. Then the APU bleed. So if both engines are running, you can switch off the APU bleed. If for some reason one engine is broken, you need to leave this one on, because else you won't have enough power. So we're going to switch it off. You will see that everything is correct, right, because these ones are eliminated, so fine. And then the next step is to switch off the APU, because also for that one there's no need to leave it enabled, because two engines are running. If for some reason the temperature is very cold, it's a recommendation to switch on the anti-ice for the engines at least, and also in some cases for the wing supply, although in this case we can leave them off for now. So we're gonna continue. First need to place some check marks, right? Speed brake is arm, so that's good. And we need to reset the rudder again using this button. But to be honest, it does not make a lot of sense, because we didn't switch, or didn't, I would say, set the pitch level correctly, etc. Right? So that's that magic button which we couldn't switch on. Then the next step is setting the flaps to optimal, right? So one position is 0 to 15, which means only the slats are out, but the recommended position is 15 to 15. And let's go outside again to show you what really happens, right? So what we can see is if we go to the back of the wing, can see that the flaps are now extended, right? But if we go to the front of the aircraft, you will also see that these wings have extended. So if I would move to position, then you can see they're moving in, right? Now the wings are becoming smaller. It's very hard to see, but they're moving. And if we're moving it the other way, they will extend again. So that works. Everything works, everything is fine. So flaps and slats are in the correct position. And then we're gonna set the trim for takeoff, and the trim can be found here, and they're already set to takeoff because that's the normal position. Once you've done that, you can continue with the rest of the checklist. Make sure that this one is set correct. Make sure that the rudder trim is set to 0, which we already did. Spoilers are armed, right? That's good. Slats are set for takeoff, which was 1515. And then check the ECAM status. Well, in this case the ECAM status is not correct, right? So technically we shouldn't proceed now and first fix this issue. The other things which you can do using, I would say, the ECAM is looking at the other systems, right? How are the other systems working? Is everything stabilized? Is everything correct? The doors, the wheels, you can even check the wheel status. The pressure systems are in good shape. Then the STS doesn't work for some reason. Clear button. Engines are good. AC power, right, all the information, and as well as the DC power, which also shows you information about the battery. So before we continue, let's see if we can switch on the nice buttons over here. Where are they? Come on. Still not. Well, I'm not gonna try it anymore. I will keep it as is. The good thing is that you can clear those alerts by pressing the clear button. In that case they will clear the messages. But of course it's not recommended to do that. You first need to resolve the issue before you can continue. But believe me, once the iris has been aligned, you can continue and you're cleared to go and say take off, right? This is where this video ends. It was a pretty lengthy one where we started the aircraft completely from scratch, and now you're ready to go taxiing. That won't be covered in this video because taxiing is, I would say, something you can do yourself. So I hope you like this video. I hope it was informative. If you've got some hints or tips, then let me know. It's via the comment box below this video. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.